Hey everyone, and welcome back for episode 3.
Three?
Yes, of our Learning on the Go series.
Yeah.
We're diving today into something super fundamental for biochem.
Water.
Water, acids, bases,
And buffers.
and buffers, yeah.
Kind of a...
If you're out there thinking, wait, isn't that like general chemistry stuff?
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
But when we're talking about the human body and all of the, intricate things happening at a molecular level.
It's really the foundation for understanding so much of what goes on.
It's true. So
Biochemistry.
we're going to go for a deep dive today.
A deep dive.
On this very topic.
All right, let's dive in.
All right, well, to kick things off,
Okay.
let's talk about water.
The wonderful world of water.
Yeah, so, we all know it's H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen.
Right.
But what makes it so essential for life? We can't live without it for more than a couple of days, right?
Well, think about it this way.
Yeah.
If you were trying to understand how a cell works,
Yeah.
and you didn't know anything about water,
Yeah.
you would have no idea
Yeah.
what was going on.
You'd be lost.
Water is the stage upon which all of the actors, the molecules in the cell, are
Doing their thing.
doing their thing. Yeah.
Doing their thing.
And so understanding how water works
Yeah.
is absolutely critical to understanding how a cell works.
Okay, so tell me about how water works then.
Well, it all comes down to hydrogen bonds.
Okay.
Water molecules are polar, meaning they have a slightly negative end and a slightly positive end.
Okay.
And this allows them to form these very weak bonds with each other and with other polar molecules.
So they're like little magnets, kind of.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Okay.
And you can actually see the consequences of that on a macroscopic scale.
Oh, really?
You fill a glass of water up to the top,
Yeah.
and you can actually have it bulge over the top because of the surface tension
Wow.
that results from these hydrogen bonds.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, so these hydrogen bonds, that's what gives water its amazing solvent power, right?
Absolutely.
It can dissolve salts, it can dissolve sugars, it can even dissolve gases.
Yeah, it's really remarkable.
Well, it's like the universal solvent.
That's why we call it the universal solvent.
Thank God.
Because it dissolves so many different kinds of things.
Yeah, so why is that so important when we're thinking about, like, cells and the human body and biochemistry?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
Our cells need to be able to transport nutrients,
Yeah.
remove waste products,
Right.
send signals.
Right.
All of that requires things being dissolved in water.
Okay, so it's like water is kind of the medium through which everything is moving.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you didn't have water, our cells would be
They'd be stuck.
stuck.
Yeah, nothing would be happening.
Nothing would be happening.
Okay, so we've got water, we've got these hydrogen bonds, things are dissolving.
Right.
And then we have the concept of pH.
Right. So how does that come into play?
Yeah, how does that play into this whole picture of water and its role in the body?
Well, remember how a small fraction of water molecules can actually ionize?
Okay.
Meaning they split into a hydrogen ion, H+, and a hydroxide ion.
So even pure water has some like acidity and some alkalinity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The pH scale is a measure of that balance.
Okay.
And so pure water, with its equal concentration of H+ and OH ions, has a pH of 7,
Okay.
which we call neutral.
So 7 is neutral.
7 is neutral.
Anything below that is
No,
acidic,
that's acidic.
more H+8, and anything above is alkaline or basic.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, more OH.
And even small changes in pH, can really affect biomolecules, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even a small change in pH can have a huge impact
Okay.
on the structure and function of biological molecules.
Like proteins, for example.
Yeah, proteins are a great example. They have a very specific three-dimensional structure
Right.
that's essential for their function.
They're like little origami things, right?
Oh.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah.
Okay.
And the folds in those proteins are held together by, you guessed it,
Hydrogen bonds.
hydrogen bonds.
Okay.
So if the pH changes,
Yeah.
those bonds can weaken or break, causing the protein to unravel
And it can't do its job.
and lose its function.
Right, because proteins are like the workers of the cell, right?
Yeah, they do all sorts of things.
They transport molecules, they help with reactions.
They catalyze reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're involved in just about every process in the cell.
So if they're not working properly because their shape is messed up,
Oh.
then everything kind of goes haywire.
Exactly. It can be really problematic.
Okay, so this is where buffers come in.
Buffers come to the rescue.
Yeah, what are they?
Well, buffers are mixtures of a weak acid and its conjugate base.
Okay.
And these two work together to resist changes in pH.
Okay.
So if a solution becomes too acidic,
Yeah.
The buffer will absorb some of those extra H+ ions,
Okay.
and if it becomes too basic, the buffer will release H+ ions.
So it's like they're kind of like monitoring the pH.
You're like little pH regulators.
Yeah, and just kind of making sure it stays within a certain range.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And this is really important because our bodies are
Yeah.
constantly generating acids as byproducts of metabolism.
Right.
So if we didn't have buffers,
Yeah.
our pH would be all over the place.
I mean, our blood would be like super acidic, right?
It could be, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so buffers are really important.
They're essential.
They're essential for life.
They're the unsung heroes of our bodies.
Okay, so tell me more about how they work.
Well, there are actually different buffer systems
Yeah.
that operate in different parts of our body
Okay.
to handle these different pH challenges.
Okay, let's dive into that.
Let's start with one of the most important ones,
Okay.
the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
This is the main player in keeping our blood pH
Right.
in a very narrow range, around 7.4.
Wow, that's pretty specific.
It is, and even small deviations from that can be problematic.
Okay.
So this is the system that kicks in when we have those inevitable fluctuations.
Right, like when we exercise
Well,
or eat certain foods.
All sorts of things, yeah.
Okay.
And it's really fascinating how this system ties in with our respiratory system.
Oh, okay.
So remember, we produce a lot of carbon dioxide, CO2, as a byproduct of metabolism.
Right.
That CO2 diffuses into our red blood cells,
Okay.
where it encounters an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase.
Carbonic anhydrase. I remember that from biochem.
Yeah, it's a very important enzyme.
What does it do?
Well, it catalyzes the reaction between CO2 and water to form carbonic acid.
Okay, and carbonic acid is a weak acid.
That's right. So it only partially dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions.
So it's like this equilibrium reaction.
Exactly. That's at the heart of this buffer system.
Okay, so we've got this equilibrium set up, but how does it actually help regulate the pH of the blood?
Well, imagine you've just finished a sprint.
Okay, I'm sprinting.
Your muscles are producing extra CO2,
Right, gotta breathe.
and that CO2 is entering your bloodstream.
Okay,
Now, this extra CO2 is going to push that equilibrium,
the one you talked about.
the one we talked about,
Okay.
to the right,
Okay,
generating more hydrogen ions.
so the blood is getting more acidic.
It's becoming a little bit more acidic, yeah.
Okay.
And that's where the bicarbonate comes in
What?
to save the day.
Or what happens?
So those bicarbonate ions can bind to those extra hydrogen ions,
Okay.
preventing a drastic drop in pH.
So it's like a buffering system, right?
That's exactly what it is, yeah.
Okay.
And at the same time, those bicarbonate ions are being transported out of the red blood cells and into the plasma
Okay.
in exchange for chloride ions.
So it's like a swap.
It is, yeah. We call it the chloride shift.
The chloride shift.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is that happening?
Well, it helps to maintain electrical neutrality in the red blood cells and in the plasma.
So it's like this delicate balance.
It's all about balance, yeah.
Okay.
Now, when that CO2-rich blood reaches the lungs,
Right.
the whole process reverses.
Oh, interesting.
So the CO2 diffuses out of the blood.
we breathe it out.
We breathe it out
Okay.
and into the air sacs of the lungs.
Okay.
And that shifts the equilibrium back to the left,
Okay.
causing the carbonic acid to break back down into CO2 and water.
So it's like undoing what happened in the muscles.
Exactly. It's restoring the balance.
Okay.
And those hydrogen ions that were bound to the bicarbonate are released.
Right.
So the blood pH returns to its normal, slightly alkaline state.
Wow. So our respiratory system and blood chemistry are like totally connected.
They're intimately connected. And this is why you see people breathing rapidly. If
Yeah.
they have a condition that's making their blood too acidic,
Oh, interesting.
they're trying to blow off that excess CO2.
To shift that equilibrium.
Exactly. It's a really important compensatory mechanism.
Wow. Okay, so we've talked about the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system,
Right?
which is super important for blood pH.
Absolutely.
What about other buffer systems in the body?
Well, different parts of the body have different needs, right?
Right.
So inside our cells, the phosphate buffer system takes center stage.
Okay, phosphate. So it's using phosphate ions.
That's right. It utilizes the equilibrium between dihydrogen phosphate and monohydrogen phosphate.
So these phosphate ions can also accept or release hydrogen ions.
Absolutely, depending on what's needed to maintain that pH balance.
So it's kind of like a similar concept to the bicarbonate system.
Very similar, yeah.
Okay, and are there any other players in this pH regulation game?
Well, don't forget about proteins.
Proteins, right?
They can act as buffers too.
How do they do that?
Well, many amino acids have
Yeah.
side chains that can act as either weak acids or weak bases.
Okay.
So they can either soak up or release hydrogen ions as needed.
So proteins are like these multi-talented molecules.
They really are, yeah.
They're doing all sorts of things.
They're involved in just about every process in the cell.
And they're helping to regulate pH, too.
Absolutely.
It's incredible how our bodies have all these different mechanisms
Right.
to keep things in balance.
It's a beautiful system.
Yeah, but what happens if, despite all these buffers, the body still gets too acidic?
Well, that's where our kidneys come in.
The kidneys, right.
They're the ultimate acid regulators.
Okay.
They have several powerful mechanisms for excreting excess acid.
So even if our buffer systems are overwhelmed,
Right.
the kidneys can step in
That's right.
and get rid of that acid through urine.
Exactly. They primarily excrete acid in the form of undissociated acids
Okay.
and ammonium ions,
Right.
and they can also reabsorb bicarbonate back into the blood.
So they can kind of fine-tune things.
That's right. They're constantly monitoring and adjusting the pH.
So it's like a finely tuned orchestra.
It really
With
is.
all these different systems working together
Working in harmony.
to
Yeah.
keep everything in balance.
And that balance is essential
Right.
for virtually every process in our body.
This has been really eye-opening.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I know we've learned about this in biochemistry,
Right.
but just hearing you explain it
Yeah.
in this way, it's like I'm understanding it on a deeper level.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for
Yeah.
people to understand this, especially if they're interested in health and medicine.
Absolutely. It's fundamental.
It's like understanding the language of the body.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the theory
Right.
of water and pH and buffers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some real-world situations.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so where were we?
We were about to dive into some real-world example.
Real-world, yeah, clinical applications of this stuff.
Yeah, where it really matters.
Okay, so let's start with dehydration.
Okay.
I mean, it's something we've all experienced.
At some point, yeah.
You get thirsty, you haven't had enough water. But what's actually going on at like a cellular level?
Well, remember how we talked about
Yeah.
water moving between those fluid compartments?
Right.
Based on the concentration of solutes?
Osmolality.
Osmolality, exactly.
Okay.
So when we lose water, whether it's through sweat or urine
Or breathing even.
or breathing, yeah,
Right.
the osmolality of our extracellular fluid increases, meaning the concentration of solutes outside the cells
Yeah.
becomes higher
Okay.
compared to inside the cells.
So it's like this imbalance.
Exactly. It creates a concentration gradient
Okay.
that pulls water out of the cells.
To try to even things out.
Exactly, to try to reach equilibrium.
Okay, and what does that do to the cells?
Well, as water is pulled out,
Yeah,
they shrink and they can't function as effectively.
that makes sense.
Yeah, because cells need water for all sorts of things.
Yeah, like what?
Transporting nutrients,
Yeah.
removing waste products,
Yeah.
maintaining their shape.
So even mild dehydration can start to cause problems.
Absolutely.
It's not just about feeling thirsty.
Right. It can affect your energy levels,
Yeah.
your cognitive function.
I mean, I know when I'm dehydrated,
Yeah.
I just feel sluggish.
Yeah, you don't think as clearly.
Yeah.
And in severe cases, it can even be life-threatening.
Wow. Okay, so dehydration is not something to mess around with.
No, it's important to stay hydrated.
Yeah. Drink plenty of fluids,
Especially when you're exercising
or if you're sick.
or if it's hot outside.
Okay, so we've talked about dehydration.
Right.
What about other clinical scenarios?
Well, another one where pH balance is really important
Yeah.
is diabetic ketoacidosis.
DKA.
DKA, yeah.
Okay, I've heard that. That's a complication of diabetes, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And it's a prime example of how metabolic imbalances can disrupt pH.
Okay.
So in DKA,
Yeah.
the body doesn't have enough insulin
Right.
to use glucose for energy.
Okay.
So it starts breaking down fat for fuel instead.
Oh.
And that process generates ketone bodies.
Ketone bodies.
Yeah,
And those are acidic.
they are, yeah.
Okay.
So as those ketone bodies build up in the blood,
Yeah.
the pH starts to drop.
Leading to metabolic acidosis.
Exactly.
Okay. And what happens then?
Well, that drop in pH can have a cascading effect on the body,
Okay.
leading to a range of symptoms: nausea, vomiting,
Okay.
rapid breathing,
Okay.
and in severe cases, even coma.
Wow, that sounds really serious.
It is, yeah. DKA is a medical emergency
Okay.
that requires prompt treatment
To get those ketone bodies under control.
and to correct the acidosis.
Okay, so this really highlights how crucial pH balance is.
It really does.
I mean, for our overall health.
Yeah, even small changes in pH can have a big impact.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, yeah.
We started with the basics of water,
Right.
talked about acids, bases, pH buffers, all those different buffer systems in the body.
Right.
And then we talked about some clinical applications.
Dehydration, DKA.
Yeah, and I think it's really helped me to see how these concepts, I mean, they're not just theoretical.
Right.
They have real implications for our health.
Absolutely.
And I think for anyone listening out there who's interested in going into healthcare.
Oh, just understanding how their body works.
Yeah, or just being more informed about their own health.
Absolutely.
This is really important stuff to know.
It is. It's fundamental.
Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Of learning on the go.
Learning on the go.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.